I will.
All right. We have a good number of people. We should appreciate everybody for coming. And for starters, I would like to welcome everybody. In my heart of the convener of the University Interdisciplinary Seminar Series. This is a series that allows us to showcase our public intellectuals, our writers, our cultural icons, to have them talk to us about things that are of concerns to us. So before I would even allow the speaker of this event today to be introduced, I just want to take a second or a minute and thank our sponsors, because without the sponsors, I believe this series would have been dead on arrival. But the series has been going on for the past 12 or so years. And that is thanks to the sponsorship of the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the Tuskegee University Faculty Senate, and I'm pleased to say our Faculty Senate chair is here present on this call, the National Park Services, the College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Agriculture, Environment and Nutrition Sciences, as well as the Department of Modern Languages, Communication, and Philosophy. I would also be remiss if I did not thank the members of the committee, the 10-member committee of this committee that work strenuously to bring us these intellectuals to talk to us. And today, we would be listening to a young Black writer who would be talking to us about his recently published work, Unbreakable Chains. But I'm not the one introducing him. I would give the opportunity to Miss Anissa Awunti to introduce our speaker to the public. Miss Anissa Awunti, are you present? And can you take the lead and introduce our speaker?
I'm muted. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was on mute. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special Black History Month edition of the Tuskegee University Interdisciplinary Series Seminar, initiated by Dr. Bill Ndi and a number of Tuskegee University faculty. This edition welcomes Mr. Shaanchuong Fohohnpah, author of Unbreakable Chains, and will be centered around identity, representation, and diversity. Mr. Shaanchuong is a Bantu American, born and bred in the plains of the Nun Valley, located in present-day nation of Cameroon. He is the youngest of a very big family, in which both parents were educators and storytellers. His mother, a great folk tales narrator, his father, a magical recounter of personal and historical anecdotes, nursed in him the love of storytelling. His oldest memories are those of flipping through storybooks and squatting beside a lantern for family story time. His attachment to the magic of words will take a hit when he is confronted by the choice of pursuing secondary studies in either arts or sciences, but not a combination. A tough choice. In the end, he picks sciences and consecrates some of his free extracurricular time to reading and writing poetry. In line with this choice, he studies physics at the university, right up to sophomore level. In the course of his sophomore year, Mr. Shaanchuong immigrated to the United States of America. The inclusive pedagogical system of the American universities allowed him to reconnect with college-level writing while studying electrical engineering at Prince George's Community College in Largo and University of Maryland College Park, both in Maryland. Today, with a master's in electrical engineering from Tuskegee University in Alabama, 10 years of practice in the domain, many years of teaching as an adjunct faculty at Gall State University, or Gall State College, sorry, an ongoing master's in systems engineering at Florida State University in Panama City, Mr. Shaanchuong is happily settled in Panama City with his lovely wife and supportive children. Mr. Shaanchuong is a published storyteller, writer, and poet. He designs his stories using notions in literature, engineering, and sciences as modules of a literary engineering project. To him, this journey is a way of reconciling his 7 lives: an engineering professional, a literature lover, a member of a royal lineage, a family man, a Pan-Africanist, and an African immigrant. The senior electrical engineer and systems engineer with the Department of Defense is an alumnus of the University of Yaoundé I and the University of Yaoundé, where he studied applied physics. He also attended the University of Maryland, where he earned a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering. Then came Tuskegee University, where he earned a Master's of Science in Electrical Engineering with concentration in systems engineering, and he is rounding up a Master's of Science in Systems Engineering at Florida State University. In addition to this invitation to the interdisciplinary seminar series, he will be attending the Florida State University Student Research Symposium with 2 presentations: a biography research on Nelson Mandela and a human factor research on an innovative solution for the physical security of ATM users. Please welcome to our virtual stage, Munto Ana Shaanchuong Mu Fohohnpah Niabo. Thank you. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Anissa. Thank you, Dr. Bilndi. Thank you, everyone present here. I acknowledge the presence of some familiar faces. I saw Dr. Benjamin Fishkin and quite a number of people I've had the opportunity of meeting in person. I will start by expressing my gratitude to Tuskegee University. I will start with a short anecdote that when I moved to Tuskegee about 10 years ago, I fancied the expression that Tuskegee chose me and not the other way around. Mind you, it was a way for me to say I was a College Park alumnus, not one from Tuskegee. But with a lot of maturity, looking back at the things, that statement was a way of prophesizing that Tuskegee University actually chose me. You cannot claim you chose Tuskegee University, not with the kind of people that founded that institution, the kind of people that that institution bred, and the kind of history that the institution embodies. You can only be chosen by it. So I'm really honored to be chosen, not only as a student of Tuskegee University, but also as today a writer who is coming back home, because to me, I think not have a full experience of what I call Blackness if you do not venture to understand, to read, or to visit Tuskegee University. So thank you so very much for this opportunity. As part of this discussion, as you all know, we are celebrating for the month of February, Black History Month is what we commemorate. And we go beyond just the celebration of Black history. We also invest our energies, our time into Black future. And so for this series, we'll be talking about something or a number of themes, which I think are pertinent to the history of the Black people and to their future. I'm talking about diversity, I'm talking about identity, I'm talking about representation, all of which were applicable yesterday, are applicable today, and will be applicable tomorrow. And I was honored to be told that I will be handling this discussion and to come along with the book Unbreakable Chains, which, as I believe, I'm the author, but I'll let the readers chip in, as I believe, travels through time and addresses these same issues that we're about to discuss on. I would like for this to be more of an interactive discussion. It's not going to be a spoiler for those who have not read the book yet. It's not going to take away the suspense from those who are currently reading the book. What I want is for us to be able to address these topics. Occasionally, I will give you some insight on how I address the topic in the book Unbreakable Chains. And I would like to receive from the audience and from the different people their thoughts and their own input with respect to the topics. So without further ado, I'll give you a quick discussion around the three items that we brought up, then we can dive into the discussion. I like to start with the idea of diversity. We're talking about globalization, and behind globalization, there's the idea of diversity. It could be diversity in terms of culture, in terms of race, in terms of religious belief. Diversity is something that has come to stay. If you're part of the Judeo-Christianism movement, you start thinking of diversity as far as back as the Tower of Babel. But every culture has a tale of how one culture grew up from another one civilization bordered from another one. And that's how diversity is part of our everyday talk. When you talk about diversity, it means some people identify themselves different from the others, which enhances the discussion of identity. So once you start talking about diversity, let's talk about identity. And when you start talking about identity, you have to think about their representation. So in Unbreakable Chains, groups of people are represented in terms of diversity. We have the American community, we have the African immigrant community, we have the African resident community, we have the Latino community, we have the Caucasian community, all of that bundled in one way or the other in the narration of Unbreakable Chains. Most of the characters have their own journey. It could be identity based on their race, based on their family upbringing, based on their aspirations. The book handles on different wings the identity crisis or the identity journey which people experience. On one part, you have that have a different way of dealing with the identity conflict they have. On the other part, you have American to their roots and trying to make sense of the identity. Still in the same book, you have a situation of a gentleman who is also dealing with his own identity issues. And subtly, we also mention of another character, this time Latina, who is dealing with her own identity as well. And as I said, when we talk of diversity, we delve into identity, and then comes the whole idea of representation. And that is where I think we all agree on one thing. Being here, participating in seminars like this, penning down stories, doing paintings, getting gatherings is a way of affirming that aspect of our identity and our representation, because we want people to see us for who we really are. And so in this book, the way I build on the characters, each character has the way of trying to affirm who they are. You have the immigrant, the African immigrant, who tries to affirm his stand as an African immigrant, just like I occasionally do as well. You have the African American who tries to affirm her position. You have, as I said, the Caucasian in that same storyline who tries to affirm his own identity. So in a nutshell, the book addresses the three things mentioned earlier. So I will send out the message. I will start the discussion here with a very fundamental question to which I will give my answer, and I would love to hear what your answers are. What is diversity? When you hear the word diversity, what do you think about? I personally, when I hear diversity, off the bat, I would think about race. having grown up in a country like Cameroon takes another definition because Cameroon counts about 230 something tribes. So you have a sense of diversity from another level. And then when you look at the continent of Africa, you also have the diversity that it carries with her, right? And then for someone who's been opportune to study in the northern part of the US, then move down to the southern part, I must admit I had my own share of cultural shock. And so you also see another sense of diversity. So my is what do we as individuals and as part of communities perceive or understand when the word diversity is brought up to in a discussion or just brought up to us in any form of exchange? Is there anyone wants to chip in?
I can say something.
Yes, go right ahead, Ms. Taylor.
Okay, good morning. When I think of diversity, I think of individual identity and kind of how it shapes each person differently.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
All right, so I'm very happy to hear at least one person. If there's anybody else wants to chip in, but I like that idea of. Give me 1 second. I was trying to mute myself and I was trying to negotiate with another member of the panel who's a little bit younger than everyone. So back to you guys. The sense of diversity, I don't want to take you into the history of how the word came about. I don't claim absolute knowledge of what it is. But I will say this. Life was a meal diversity is that spice that goes in every one of the single meals. It could be the entree, the course meal, or the dessert. You cannot do without diversity. And there's no better place in the world that has to deal with the idea of diversity as the United States of America. Not because the other people are not diverse, but because of the history that this country embodies and the efforts it's been doing over time to address the topic of diversity. But like in every debate, you have the two sides. You have those who promote and you have those who try to kill the discussion. And for us writers, all the people who are engaging in trying to put diversity out there, you do encounter some subtle, challenges. I'll take the case of the state of Florida, right? You have lots and lots of people who embrace the diversity that Florida offers. But you also have occasionally, even within our local government or even our state representation, actions that tend to slow down in terms of diversity. I will give a simple example here. Our governor, for example, works really hard on trying to take out, critical race theory from school, from the school system. On one side, to debate if it's needed or not, but on the other side, how do you take such discussions out of a situation where diversity is a must? So coming back to the discussion about diversity, it becomes something that you all should occasionally think about. Because in order for you to interact with the people around you, in order for you to be identified, you have to embrace your identity, which means you have to accept the identity of the other person. And when you start doing that, you must come to the acceptance that diversity exists. Again, if diversity exists, find a way to handle it. So in Unbreakable Chains, one of the goals was to address the discrepancies that exist in the definition of diversity between your average African immigrant, your average African American immigrant, and your average Caucasian American, right? Or European American. So I will say this. I'm really itchy because it's hard not to go into talking about the book, but I'm trying to give you the key topics here. I will say this, as you read the book, you realize, and it might be helpful to you, how to deal with diversity, how to open up to the difference that might exist between you and the other person. In the book, we address the difference in the perception of certain things like emotion, the perception of culinary delicacies, the perception of grief, and even the perception of success, right? So the book addresses diversity at different levels. And you will see the way one character handles an event is based on their background. The way another character handles the same event is also based on that character's background. And so you start realizing that diversity is a must. As I said, it is that one spice that will be on every meal that you have to eat. And of course, that brings us to the next part. As I said, when you talk about diversity, you cannot ignore the fact that people want to identify themselves. So I don't know, are there any questions on this except on what diversity is and how it impacts our everyday life and how it's being addressed by me as a writer or by someone else that you know?
I think Dr. Esunga would want to jump in there. She sent a text message. Dr. Esunga, do you want to say a word?
Yes, I thank you. Thank you, Professor. I thank you, Dr. Fohohnpah, for the presentation. I'm trying to wrap my brain around the notions that you're presenting. And when I think of diversity, I first start with the similarities that exist between us, on all the levels that you were discussing. And then I think of the diversity. So for me, diversity means similar, but also different. I want to hear more about what you're saying because I like that your perspective a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And just so I clear up with the audience, even though I aspire to be a doctor, I'm not just one yet. So feel free to call me Mr. Fohohnpah. Thank you. So in terms of if you've ever flipped a quarter of the US currency, it's written in Latin, and I'm not a Latin expert, right? I'm trying to find the direct translation. Something in the line of united by our differences, or united we stand, something close to that. What I want to bring up is we focus on what differentiates us when we talk about diversity, but rightfully, as you said, there is even more that unites us than what makes us different. I like to fancy the idea that whenever you go to a place, you learn about three things. How do they celebrate the death? How do they celebrate the birth? And how do they celebrate marriage? That's how you get to understand the very essence of a people. And you will always be amazed at how much similarity they will have in your culture. The language will be different, but the actions, the intent, and even the aspirations will be the same. So yes, diversity really is what shows up, because brain sometimes has that tendency of seeing the red flag than what seems normal. But in reality, diversity hides the forest of similarity between people. I moved to the States. I knew that in a state like the state of Maryland, you will find documents, official documents written in Spanish. I never knew that. I never knew that in the States, Spanish was something you could hear people speak fluently. When I moved down south, it took me a while to accustom myself to the southern accent, but still it was English. So the only difference you will have has to do with the context in which the people are, but they will keep practicing the same thing. We will have the same commonalities or similarities between us, and it's only in the quest of trying to be individuals that will start creating that diversity. What famous likes to say, and I think it's her name is Joyce Meyer, I believe, and she likes to say, God fancies diversity. The fact that we're of different races, that we speak different languages, that we do things differently, it's not a way to divide us. It's a way to build a rainbow, as Nelson Mandela would say, a rainbow nation, where every color has its own place and the sum of all colors create the beauty. So that diversity, really fancy it with a very positive connotation. Unfortunately, the world is what it is. Some people use the diversity as a tool to separate people, when in reality, it's what makes the people strong. Because if I can accept you and you accept me, I can bring something to the table which you do not have. And that some of the things we bring to the table makes us a better group of people. So yeah, that's my input when it comes to diversity and looking at it from the similarity point of view. Do we have another input about diversity or what we've discussed so far?
All right, I might just like to chip in a little bit, not to steal a lot of time. You raised something which is very interesting, and I would just like to extend to those who are listening. You talked about how celebrations of death, birth, marriages, and everything, which is very important. I'm just thinking about the concept of naming, how children or people get their names. It is all around the various celebrations you've listed here and the intent that comes with naming a person or a child. And I see, by even understanding something as simple as a name, we could celebrate or accept that concept of diversity, which Dr. Esunga raised as similar. While we are similar, or while we look alike, we still are different because we have different names and so on and so forth. And I'll just take one other second to say something. You made mention of Cameroon as made up of 230 tribes. I would just like most of the audience, this is my personal take, that the use of the word tribe is pejorative and diminutive. Let's talk about ethnic groups. There are ethnicities in Cameroon and not tribes. So thank you. Continue with your conversation and let's go on.
May I ask a question?
Okay,
Yes,
go right ahead,
Dr.
Dr. Fishman.
This is for the soon-to-be Dr. Fohohnpah. I'll ask, it seems to me that diversity, particularly right now, is under assault. And I'm wondering, do you think it has always been thus? And do you think it's going to remain as we move forward?
Thank you, Dr. Fishkin. That's a very good observation. I agree with you off the bat that as the human race has a difficult time accepting diversity, partially because sometimes that feels threatened. It's that survival instinct that you want to protect yours without realizing that the guy across from you is the same aspiration as you do. And if you sit on the table and talk, you can really find out that it's not you the problem. They just want to survive, and you can actually survive together. So will that last? I will say diversity, that fight against diversity will never go down, will never disappear. Why? Because people still have that difficulty of understanding that diversity is not supposed to be a problem. It's supposed to be a tool for progress. But leaders who like to comfort their position, who like to think they are the supreme leaders, often build or establish knowledge management approaches to convince their subject that they don't need to be in any union with other cultures. They try to block the idea of diversity. And that is rampant around the world, where you see a leader comes to power and if it's not out of nepotism that they surround themselves with only people that are culturally linked to them, they try to lock their people down in not looking at the outside world because they feel if I tell them that is the enemy, then I control them. But if I let them go out, they might find better options. They might come out stronger. They might come out with more to give. And on an Unbreakable chain is interesting. There's a scene where the young African immigrant who goes back to Cameroon is confronted with discussion over some sort of diversity. That is, you have your police officer who's coming over, trying to make him understand. Thank you. You have your police officer who's coming over to him, trying to make him feel bad for accepting that American side of him, right? Putting in question the fact that he's not one of them anymore. In reality, he's a plus to that culture. The fact that he's a member of the diaspora, he's bringing more. And it's that fear of that more, that uncertainty of what more might mean to the guy who's in place. Does more mean I'm going to lose my powers? Does more mean you're going to get more than I do? That creates that constant fear, and which is normal. No one has to blame or push away fear. Fear is a normal emotion. If you're not fearful or if you don't feel fear, you cannot claim to be courageous. It's okay to be afraid of something that is different, but it's even more important to try to understand what makes it different. So, in a nutshell, yes, there will always be this war against diversity, but if we continue having get-togethers like this, discussions like this, to educate and to exchange amongst ourselves about what diversity is, with the way the world is going, with the ability we have of broadcasting to number of people across instantaneously, I think we will be touching more and more audiences and let them embrace the idea of diversity.
Very good. Thank you. It strikes me perhaps some have had an overdose of fear, and thus that is the problem. But thank you.
Thank you. So, as I said, when we're talking about diversity, there's also the discussion of identity. And I think the idea of similarities opens up the door for us to talk about identity. We are, if we go from the DNA strands, we are each. I once read a quote that says, one thing we have in common is that we're each different. So the one thing that puts us all together is that we're not alike, we're all different beings. And that goes the same when you look at the ethnic groups, the racial groups, and all other form of, the one thing we have in common is that we represent a way of doing things, we represent an identity. So to enter that discussion of identity, as I did before, I will put the question out there and I will give you my own thoughts about it. Or let's say I'll put the question and get your own thoughts then before I serve you what I think. And my question goes as thus. Do you think your identity is something that is unique to you, unique to your culture, or unique to what people think about you? So where do you put your identity? Is it something that is, it's my identity is all about me? Or do you think your identity is about the community in which you live? That is, you're Cameroonian, you're American, you're Floridian, you are, from Alabama? Or do you think your identity is just something, well, you go on the census and the government says, hey, you have African descent, or you have European heritage, or you have Asian background? Where do you think your identity sits when you hear the word identity? Anyone? I hope it's not a loaded question and everyone is scared of addressing it.
I think personally, it's just within yourself, but also kind of how other people view you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kennedy.
I think your identity is you. what resonates with you and what you stand for, what you're about, what do you identify with, what do you identify as in a certain situation. I think it is comprised of, you know, your morals and your ethics help identify you, because they identify what you're going to be a part of and what you're not going to be a part of, what you're going to stand for and what you're not going to stand for.
Right.
In part.
Thank you. Very good input, Ashley. Thank you.
More input.
Okay. So Ashley and Miss Kennedy gave I see multiple. So why people are trying to probably okay, I have one person that chose to reply by chat. They believe identity is a combination of things, which is true. So the author, from the author perspective in Unbreakable Chains, identity is all of what you've said, but it has this unique thing that it's not static, it grows. Your identity can change based on where you are, what you do, what you live through. And a good example of that in the novel is the European American Paul Patton, who I will not tell much about him, goes through a journey where his identity is morphed constantly from his childhood, adulthood, time in the novel where you actually meet him as a grown and established person. His identity keeps changing, not 180 degree of being totally different, but one layer builds on top. And as Ashley said, you start seeing his ethical values kicking in, and a little bit of everything around piles up to create that identity as he moves forward. Why is it important for us to talk about identity from my perspective? I grew up with that unique pleasure of having a father and a mother, each belonging to different ethnic groups in Cameroon. And as a young man, I was to a certain extent confused. Not worried, but to a certain extent confused. Yes, today I summarize myself by defining myself as a Bantu, because I know being a Bantu, part of my paternal background and my maternal background all merge into being a Bantu. But more importantly, I understood that the way identity works will stick with you, and people will give you an identity until you either embrace that identity, make them change that identity. Let me explain. When I moved to the States, things changed. The people with whom I grew up don't see me the same. When I got naturalized, I have a new passport and I go around as an American. When I'm home, I identify myself as, you know, a son of Moyakum or Nzime. And so those are the ethnic groups where my parents come from. But I am all of that. Identity, just like diversity, is not yourself out and just feeling you're absolutely different from the others. All it means is you're just a combination of many other things. For those who fancy sciences, we have combinations and permutations. So permutations usually is the same things rearranged in different orders. Combination is a peak of various things of different apartments. So identity is all of these things we've said. It's your ethical value, it's the context in which you grew, it's what people think, it's what you think of yourself. All of that morph in creating that identity. And as people of color, to the theme or the main discussion we're having for Black History Month is we have moved affirming our identity, not just because we have to confirm it or affirm it to the rest of the world, but because it is what allows us to grow as individuals. So, case in point, at the beginning of this discussion, I told you my stand as to an alumni of Tuskegee University. Initially, I looked at it as like, hey, I came there for a master's degree. So in reality, I'm a student of Maryland, University of Maryland, and I'm just, at Tuskegee for my master's. But when I discovered the value, the added value that I got from Tuskegee University, knowing that I belong forever in history, that has left a mark in humanity, perspective, and therefore changed my identity. So we as people of color, we as human beings in general, shouldn't shy away from identity. Sometimes you might feel a little bit disturbed to be different from everyone. But mind you, you are not different. You have the same thing, but the permutations are different. They've just been rearranged in another way. And so, unbreakable chains, in my life, in your life, one of the things we have to fancy as we acknowledge that we are different and the same through diversity is that if you shy from owning your identity, you are doing this universe a disfavor because you're one unique element that has to add the bigger set to the universal set. So if you extract yourself, then you make all of us incomplete. And so that message goes for all of us. Someone fancies. I'm not really good with the term they use, but they like to fancy. Make sure you have a friend from all other races. That allows you to know yourself better. But I would say make sure you have a friend from all other cultures because that allows you to know yourself better. So as for me, as an African, I've learned a lot by being around my African American friends. I've learned a lot about being around my European American friends. I've learned a lot being around my Latino friends. And I will tell you this, you understand the other, you realize what they're bringing to the table, and you can do only one thing, is to embrace them by affirming your identity. So that's my stand on it. So any other to the topic of identity?
Yes, Dr. Kumar has his hands raised. So he has a question for you.
Thank you, Dr. Andy. And I really enjoying this seminar. See, there is unity in diversity, It's like, you have various flowers, and when you put them in a bouquet, they all look together good, So so I'm really, happy with what he's saying that, being together, learning from each other, and also, respecting the identity of each other is the best way to go. And in sciences, basically, that's what we adopt, that, we have people from various countries, various disciplines, and still we work together. So, and it's very, very nice thing to do. And I'm really thankful that, he's bringing a lot of good wives. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you.
May I add, maybe I come perhaps from more of a glass half full perspective, but maybe you determine your identity by things that are going on that you cannot tolerate, or you cannot keep quiet about, or you cannot ignore. Maybe you're defined in a fashion by looking about and seeing things going on, like you mentioned in Florida, that ought not be.
Right. And I agree with Dr. Fishkin, and thank you, Dr. Kumar, for bringing up the science side of things as well. And about this topic of identity, one thing, at least to me, one thing stands out, that if you think of yourself as an individual who's part of a greater structure, which is a community, you should be able of always thinking of it as from a science perspective, right? Like you have material, you have molecules, you have atoms, then you have electrons, protons, and all that stuff. Because without the proton and the neutrons, you have no nucleus. Without the nucleus, you cannot have an atom. Without an atom, you will not have a molecule. Without the molecule, you will not have the structure. So, in as much as our identities are shaped by our beliefs, by the things we encounter in life, by how we react to them, by the things people, I guess, project onto us, a very important thing we have to do about that is realize that that identity is an essential part of the environment we are in. And we need to be able to push that identity forward. Sometimes you can feel upset because you seem to be the only one seeing things a certain way. And sometimes people go as far as denying the identity. We can deny all we want. As I said, it's more like a DNA strand kind of thing. You can deny, but as long as people ascribe to you certain values based on what they project, they have an idea of what your identity is. As long as you sit sometimes all alone and think about the things you do, you have your own identity. So, still in line with our discussion today, and this goes to my fellow Tuskegee folks that are here, the students that logged in. You are in one of the most iconic institutions in America. And I will say this, the people before you left a trail, you know, they exist because they own the identity in a world that didn't necessarily give them the chance to own that identity, but they believed in it. And so just like, or like creation, sometimes it takes a while for people to acknowledge the essence of certain things. You just leave your identity, you try to showcase yourself. It doesn't matter if people appreciate it or not. With the right way down the road, you will impact someone's life in one way or the other. A classmate of mine at FSU said something last week. He said, no matter what you do in life, somebody somewhere is looking up to you. And if you have that in mind, you'll be very conscious about what identity you want to embrace, and how you project that identity.
I had something to say. I have something to say. I just wanted to commend you on how relatable this whole conversation is, especially the one of identity, because also as somebody who moved back here, although I was born here, also having moved back here, I faced a lot of those, the different identity crises that, you know, you probably also went through. And I think that that's something that, as Mr. or Dr. Fishkin mentioned, changes based on your life, based on your experiences, and also based on how you were raised, right? So I was raised a different way, but as you get out of your comfort zone, that also shapes the identity that you adopt as you get older and mature. And I think that it's necessary to be true to yourself during these times, because you tend to attract different people. And if you stay true to who you really are, then you attract the things that are really meant to be in your life. But sometimes we tend to either fake an identity and abandon what really belongs to us, either because of a negative connotation or a negative stereotype. And we try to become more of what we think as a positive one, but it doesn't necessarily fit into our lives. And so you tend to pick up on the wrong things. And it ends up seeming like a vicious cycle of an identity crisis. Meanwhile, if you stay true to whatever identity you had and accepted that, okay, yes, this is who I am, and it comes to a negative connotation, I can learn from it, like accept it and learn from it. It probably would have been more helpful than trying to adapt something where you really didn't belong, or something that doesn't really fit into your life. So I just wanted to touch on that, and because I appreciate that a lot as somebody who went through that. And I just think it's a lifelong process of figuring that out. So thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. Thank you so much for that contribution. I know Dr. Bilndi is watching, and the way Anissa nailed that identity thing, she might have to come up once again and address identity in one of your many seminars. We will move up from identity to the next level, which is representation. And that is, I think that's one word I really, or one concept I really embraced or discovered when I moved to the US. Not that in my country of origin it wasn't relevant. It was very relevant, as we said, with 230 something ethnic groups. Representation is very relevant. But because here it is even more so relevant because it's a way for this nation of ours to heal from its past. And about healing is that it took you 10 years to cause pain. It will take you an exponential number of years to heal that same pain, to restore the trust, and to move forward. And representation doesn't just suffice in having someone of an ethnic group or someone of, I don't know, of a racial group or a religious group or someone of a particular sexual orientation or someone, I don't know, like just having them on book covers, in movies. That is just the level of representation. Representation comes with us being able to include those things that we saw different from the others in what we have. A good scenario is in Unbreakable Chains, for those who maybe had the chance to read it. It's the moment when Mercy, one of the characters, actually gets to try Cameroonian delicacy. And everybody, because she was there, she was offered a different meal, right? But she chose to eat the same meal like the others. And not just eat the meal, but eat it the same way the locals do. And I think that is where representation comes in. Because she embraced her identity, but chose to represent herself by understanding what is it the other culture does. And we in America, we might be in the path of doing this, but we have to do it some more. So what I mean by doing some more is representation should not limit itself by us just saying stuff or just doing stuff. Go out and get you a book about the other culture. Travel to other places. If you're from the South, go visit the North. If you're from the East, go visit the West. Because by you going to learn about another culture, you unconsciously represent your culture there. I could very well go by go around calling myself Cameroonian and contenting myself about it. But I know when I call myself a Bantu American, I'm representing a bigger whole, the Bantu people. And at the same time, I'm representing the American people. And so by not shying away from my identity, I am discovering more of the American side of things, but I'm also representing more of the Bantu side of things. So representation is something that needs to go to the grassroots level. We should, I'm not of that generation, but there was a time when people had pen pals across continents and they would write to each other, trying to talk about what they did, what their life is like. That is how representation is. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be geographically located where you want to be represented, but sharing your experience, owning your identity, embracing that diversity, unconsciously becoming an ambassador of where you're from. You are representing the people that, from where you came from. And I'd like to bring this back to the reason why we're here, Black History Month, Unbreakable Chains, to say one of the reasons, I would say the main reason behind me writing this book was when we had our first child, a girl. I asked myself, what was it I could give her that could stand the test of time? Could buy her presents, could do everything. But I understood she needed more than that, and she still does. So I said, I will document my version of the world, the way I want to be represented through this book, and the way I think people have represented themselves to me. So she will have an idea of what to be who you are. And when she reads that, one of the things I hope she will do she'll be able to represent herself, own herself. We tell her every time what her name means. And we'll tell her you should hold your name with pride. And we tell her every time you should respect the other persons with their name and their culture. Because it is that merging. The only way you can represent is by being you and accepting the other. I'm trying to find an easy way to say it, but representation, dear folks, if we talk about representation, it's a must, we must embrace diversity, identity, and then understand that that is the only way representation comes. It's not by nominations, it's not by affirmative action only, it's not by, it's also by accepting that diversity we sometimes are scared of, and that identity we sometimes conceal us, and it's rightfully said, some of us fake the identity. We're not doing a service to humanity. So what are the audiences speak on representation? I know this is the one that many people will relate to because it's an important topic in American politics and American history. What do you guys have to say about representation?
I think that representation is super important. I feel like, especially as a young Black person, it has a lot to do with how I view myself and the things that I view as something that I could be able to do. Like, if the only thing that, if the only thing that I'm seeing are people like committing like crimes and doing drugs and violence and stuff, then in my mind, I'm gonna be like, okay, that's all that is available to me. But if I see like Black scholars, Black doctors, Black lawyers, that's gonna inspire me. So I think that representation is really important.
Thank you so much. That's a very insightful contribution. Because I actually should have touched that topic in the sense that by representing, said before, there's someone looking up to you, and that serves as a springboard to that someone. So when we go out there, and until you are confronted with a place where you feel like there's no one representing you, you never understand the essence and the importance of being represented. You are somewhere where people talk about all the interests, and strange enough, nobody talks about your interests. Then you understand you are there for a reason. You are there to represent your people. You don't want the person coming after you to face the same difficulties you're facing. And this goes beyond racial lines. I'm even talking about religion. I'm talking about life perspectives. And the media, what it is, does inform us very well. The media, I'm talking about conventional media and social media, but because they have, I wouldn't say lousy, but a very strategic way of handling representation, sometimes we can feel left out. Sometimes we can feel misrepresented. Sometimes we can feel sometimes really represented. There are all feelings that can come out of it. But the field of representation is and will remain a playing field. If you stand for who you are already representing yourself and the people after you. You're representing your beliefs and the people who believe the same things as you do. You're representing the people who long for what you long for. Because someone identifies themselves to you, you are unconsciously representing them and representing yourself. In of an African American in America, one of the hurdles you have is breaking through communication barriers. You know, you come with your, I wouldn't say West African accent, because even in West Africa, different countries have different accents. You come with an accent, and for the major part of your first year or first month, you don't talk a lot because most of the time people don't understand you. Most of the time you struggle so hard to be able to enunciate and pronunciate words that people don't even understand you. And there's nothing more frustrating than people not understanding you. You try so hard, but once you start hanging around people, you don't have to do any effort to start sharpening your tongue to be able to be understood. It comes natural because diversity. identity and representation are natural aspect of life. Once you hang around people, let's say you start picking up their accents, it's not because you sit alone in your room and mimic the accent. It's because you are embracing certain things they do. And they get used to your own tongue, the way you speak. And before you know it, you are back on the playing field. You are who you are, and they do understand you without having you to do any extra effort. So my point is, conversation starts from the grassroots. First, we can complain about what the media does, what the right does, what the left does, what the conservatives do, what the Democrats do. We can complain about all that, but that is at a higher level. Not focus on the structure of a building by looking at the top floor. Think about the foundation, the grassroots. Represent yourself at the level of the grassroots. If you are unhappy about the situation, get yourself a voter's card. Vote because you're representing yourself. If you're unhappy about something, go on the forum and type about what you think makes you unhappy. If you are happy about something, let people know. I'm happy about what is going on here. I'm happy about this. By voicing your identity, you are representing you and a bigger portion of this world. And I'd like to tell a very good friend of mine, shout out to Brenda Ellis, that this book can be, I won't say tough, but tricky for those who've never read African literature. But if you actually take your time and read it, you might be lucky to realize, I don't know if it's luck or what, but you realize that one of the things I did, the life of African that I am, the confrontations that I faced in life, even confrontations that I faced just by being back in Cameroon, the difficulties I think fellow African Americans have, I think people haven't identified themselves as African being the root of the base of humanity. And by so doing, it was my own way of representing these different cultures. And I go hard at it. I mean, I don't represent any culture as being an ideal culture. I call out the good and the evil side or the bad side of every culture, because that's what representation is. It's not just representing people negatively, it's also representing them positively. So yes, that's my take about representation. I don't know if there's anything someone wants to add when it comes to representation.
Representation is super, super important. I personally grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. So my education was not particularly geared towards me. I did not experience a lot of Black culture until I went to my HBCU. So it's a very big thing. I didn't see a lot of Black people going to school and going to college. So coming to Tuskegee, it was amazing to me to even know that there was just different types of Black people from all over in places that I didn't even know that we were. And it opened my eyes to a lot, to give me a lot more opportunity. It opened my mind. Now I'm trying to travel more to see and experience these other cultures and see what they're about and what they're doing and where, sorry, kids.
That's okay.
But it's so
my fair share with me.
out there. It's so important for even our younger generations to know and experience other Black cultures, other faces, not just us here in America, not just in Africa. There, Panama, in our Afro-Latina communities. I didn't start learning about stuff like that until college. Blew my mind. So that representation, to know that they are there, is very.
I agree with Ashley, and Ashley makes me think about something we probably have all lived through. The whole Wakanda frenzy, the Woman King. It's not this creation of the seven art are not just oblivious, right? They gain that and that admiration because for once, some people could identify themselves on the big screen. They could see something that only phantom in their wildest dreams. And it's a shame for this generation to stop. It would be a shame that people like those men have literally given their life, give you a stepping stone, content yourself in crossing your arms in Wakanda forever. He's given the blueprint. You go build Wakanda. And I'm not just talking about, this is not a feature of me trying to sell you Wakanda or Marvel Comics, but it's to point out how the little things we do can be. And Ashley said something, and I've had this discussion with Professor Bildy before, what we like to call the different shades of black. Go to every continent, I challenge you, you will find a significant, I'm not talking about just a few, a significant amount of people of black race. Not just because of the different reasons that they were moved there, it's also because humanity has its origin from the continent. And that as we moved away from the continent, the phenotype was affected because of the weather and the experiences we had. But color set aside, needs to be for everyone. You cannot represent yourself without representing the other. Imagine a rainbow that looks only green. How ugly is that? Imagine a flower that has only one set of colors. Only way you get a place is in the spectrum of diversity. You have to make sure everyone is represented. It's for those doing statistics, it's the perfect sample of a universe in which we live. In your circle, your contacts, in the way you do things, when you represent yourself, make sure the person next to you feels represented. Because, as I said, the person has the same aspiration and the same goals like you do. But if you fail to acknowledge that and only foster the goals you have, thinking you're doing a disservice to that person, you're doing a disservice to yourself because that person has an ingredient or a perspective that you do not have. I know this is the weekend, and I know I have plans for the weekend. I will take long talks for a pause and let the audience give their feedback. And I like what Yvette says. We share the same humanity. And if you read one of the descriptions about unbreakable chains, it's that point. It specifies that it's one. All the diversity, whether you were born in Cameroon, born in what place I would take in Florida, born in Callaway, or born in somewhere in Mumbai, or born in Johannesburg, or in Marseille. I don't care where you're from, but you realize you can choose to be all by yourself and just build this dull, monochromatic color, be part of a rainbow. That's what we really are. So over to the audience. I can't wait to hear what you people have to say on either one of the discussion topics. It could be diversity, identity, or the big elephant in the room, representation, or something else that has to do with humanity.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Fohohnpah. We'll take the questions. I see there are people itchy to talk. We'll give room. Just raise your hands and please turn on your video to talk so that we can also appreciate and see you. Put a face to the name. Thank you very much. Who's going first?
I'll go first.
Okay, DeAndre.
I just want to say I was at work listening to the presentation, and I've really enjoyed it. And just about representation, good representation is unspeakably important, like everyone was saying. If you feel like your group is represented in a positive light, you're less likely to dilute or deny your own diversity and be that different spark that makes us all unique and in the same and in that way. Because I used to dilute my own name because I felt like Andre without DeAndre was more recognizable. And it's just something I had been dealing with myself. And that's what I was thinking about during the presentation. And now I proudly identify with my name my mother gave me, which is DeAndre. And there may not be a DeAndre that's a CEO right now, but we are that generation where we will be. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, DeAndre.
Thank you, DeAndre.
Okay, next, I thought was it Shagani?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say, I just been listening in, and you hit on all the points. I believe it's important and it's necessary for progress, as far as like diversity, identity, and representation. I just wanted to touch on representation, what I was getting from you. Like in a nutshell, it's like, what I'm getting is that representation brings awareness and access to truth, right? So like, if you don't know something, then you're going to form opinions that are based on non-truths and biases and in our own fears. Because I know you touched on fears, and not necessarily that fears are bad. I mean, they can be bad when we just like focus on the fear rather than like our, like what we do, our action after we have this fear comes along. What do? I think that's the bad part, is when we don't react in the proper way. But as far as like just with representation, to me, when you're representing, when everyone is represented, we start to see the truth in all of it. And that on a basic level, we're all human. And we all pretty much are the same. Yeah, we have our identities, and yeah, we have our differences and our quirkiness and all those type of things. But on a basic level, representation just brings us to this, back to the basic, that we are all pretty much human, you know? So that's the only thing that I wanted to touch on.
Thank you so much. That's very deep. Thank you.
Thank you. I would beg to recognize one of our deans, Dr. Olga Glotova. Thank you for being present. And if you have a word for our speaker, it will be more than welcome. Is Dr. Glotova still with us? She might have dropped off. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah, we have Kenneth and Madison. Kenneth, you can go ahead.
Hello. I got on pretty much midway through the conversation, and this has been so enlightening. So thank you guys for even creating a platform to where we can discuss this type of stuff, and just not discuss it, but discuss it in a healthy way. And so even when even when you're dealing with identity, you're dealing with diversity. One thing that's very important as people is making sure that we have a healthy environment to learn who we are. And I think that's why for some people, it's hard to figure out exactly who you are, because we don't have a protective environment to be able to discover, and after we discover, be okay with who we are. And so, I mean, that's something for anyone, racial, sexual background, whatever it is, orientation is making sure that there's a healthy environment to do so. Even when we start talking about diversity, which is absolutely amazing, and it's very important for us to learn and get out and explore. By doing this, it actually makes us a better person, because it allows us to appreciate just not the different ethnicities and the different backgrounds, but it also allows us to appreciate ourselves and what we have to offer even more. So I just wanted to say that. But again, thank you so much for creating a platform to where we can actually have this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth.
Thank you, Kenneth.
We have Miss Ellen.
Hi.
I just want to say thank you for this discussion today. I really love that we have a way to like talk about representation because growing up, I grew up in a lot of white schools and white neighborhoods, and watching like where I grew up and like on the media, I didn't see a lot of like representation of like because black people do this and that. Like there was always like white people, like white teachers, white doctors, white lawyers. Because like I didn't grow up like this, but I have cousins who grew up to where they thought they can't be successful because they don't see people like them being very successful. So I love that like now at Tuskegee, I see lots of successful people and how us as Black, we can be doctors, we can be lawyers, we can be successful teachers, stuff like that. And good representation helps people like us believe that we can be successful. So I'm glad that we like talk about things like that today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madison. So let's continue. Let's take 2 or more comments. No other comments? Well,
I have a general comment.
okay, thank you.
So I thank Mr. Fohohnpah a lot for bringing awareness to many of us, right? Where the 3 points, the identity, representation, diversity, I think go together. I'm looking forward to reading the book to learn more about every aspect of these 3 dimensions that you presented to us. I dare to think they're interrelated. And as you mentioned many times, they cause us to think in terms of really going back to the basics, right? So it's a lot that we unpack today. And I think if we read the book, we will understand even more. It whets your appetite. Once you want to read the book and learn about these characters, how they the intersection of everything that you discussed today. So thank you so very much. Thank you, Professor Indy, for bringing us Mr. Fohohnpah to our community here. And as he said, he's back home, and we are happy to welcome him back home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Fohohnpah, you would have the last word.
All right.
For your audience.
So I will start by giving, if you have a pen and paper, I will give you something to go home with for everyone. I will start by saying thank you in the most genuine and honest form I can do it. That is in my mother tongue, Chirambo. It says Owufo. That's how we say thank you. And the reason I choose to say it in these words, I could say thank you, I could say my gratitude, but I choose to say Owufo because I want to represent who I am. DeAndre brought something up about using your name, and name has power. And name has power not only by the significance that it might bear in the language, but by the emotion, by the intent that you bear that name that was given to you. And one thing I aspire and did in Unbreakable Chains, I could have gone for easier and familiar names, but I went with names that I think identify the characters in their ethnical, belongings, group, and appartenance. And in the long run on the website, I will go ahead and also put the meaning of those names because I think it's important for people to understand why those names were picked. But to wrap this very beautiful experience that I've had with my family at Tuskegee University and all the members of the audience, I will say, Owufo, thank you. And I will encourage us to go out there and believe it's possible. Whatever people said where it wasn't possible, it is possible. If you can think about it, it's possible. The man standing in front of you started dreaming of writing and publishing a book as early as 9 years old. I remember a classmate of mine told me, you will want to publish a book. I was not serious about what I was writing then. Went to college, got a job. I remember going for a drug test, and the physician looked at me and said, "The day you write a book, make sure you send me a copy." What I'm trying to say by that is everything is possible. We live in a world where not just complaining about the negative things around us that do us service. It's standing for the good things around us. And whether it's identity, diversity, or representation, we can do it the right way. We can embrace diversity in the beautiful way. We can show identity in a beautiful way. And of course, we can do representation in a beautiful way because those behind and those next to us are looking up to us. So to end this, I will say, the title of the book is Unbreakable Chains. I want us to look at it from a different paradigm. It's not unbreakable chains because we are shackled to something unwanted. It's unbreakable chains because we are shackled to something that is bigger than us, which is humanity. And there's no point. You can run all you want. You are connected to humanity. And you owe it to Mother Humanity to be able to accept others for who they are, affirm yourself for who you are, and by so doing, represent what humanity really is, which is that big oneness, that beautiful rainbow that will always stick out when all the chaos and all the pain and all the trauma of the world will be existing. It will be that one safe haven where those colors will reassure people that when it's all said and done, there's still humans amongst the people who walk the planet Earth. So thank you so much, Dr. Bildy. Thank you to everyone who's here. I appreciate you guys coming out and looking forward to exchange some more with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so